Welcome everyone to Forward Focus. It is November, so now you can put out all of your Christmas decorations and New Year's Eve decorations already, right? We are gonna talk about what we've got coming up here in the weeks ahead in the market. So I'm gonna begin with the Nasdaq, and let me grab a larger time frame chart here. Whoa. My charts are not pulling. Here we go. All right, we're going to start off. I'm taking a look at, I'm going to open up our weekly chart here. So we've been looking at a pattern in League of Traders last week that we've dubbed like the Momo 2T. So basically what this pattern is, and we talked about this a little bit last week, I think, is that we have this series of two highs. And as we spoke of, when we were looking at this bigger kind of range that's been developing here, a lot of different things can happen at this high. We can get things like, momentum reversal, stuff like that. But we usually would have seen two nice, smoother moves to the downside for that to go up and do a third high and then pivot nicely off that third high. So instead what happened was it had this move up into this previous high here. We've had a correction here, and then we've had a move that's coming into a higher high. So this is another type of reversal strategy, and we haven't gotten, really a smaller time frame set up on this yet to reverse. But what you want to do is, as this is coming up here now to the new high, we want to look at what's going on the intraday charts. And actually, we had a nice example from one of our peeps over here in League of Traders. I'm going to show you the chart that he shared with me because it's a really good example. Hopefully he doesn't mind. Here is the example of a Momo 2T here. And this is on gold. So what we had here is that as this came into a high, I was actually short on this too. We had a move here. This came into the 76.4% Fibonacci retracement of for a fan. So when you put your fan on here, you had a nice Fibonacci fan retracement into there. Came into lows, got a good support level, popped back up. This zone here, again, is the 76.4% fan on this last drop. And I've been doing both the micros and the major, the regular gold contract here, GC. And the micro actually set up here and did a double tap on the highs as gold went and did a slightly higher high. So what you'll see is that you've got these two highs here. You've got a correction, pulls up, does kind of a little counter correction, and then goes for that next high. So that is your Momo 2T that hit at that level. Good two-wave pullback here, comes back into some support, does a double tap of support and bounces. And this double tap is what we like to look for these pivots, for these reversal setups. This is a nice two-wave drop here on gold. So momentum picked up on the way back up, which is why it didn't react as well off the 76.4 as it did over here. I'm going to show you my charts too on this. Let me go back here. So here was, it was just starting to come into that next level a second time around. So here's the two fans on the micro. So notice how it hit that, and it also corresponded to some nice Fibonacci retracement. The Fib retracement was based upon the bigger upside move over here. You can't really see it, but it's based on the upside move over here. And so momentum was starting to pick up on that move. And here's what happened on gold. It took a little bit of that extra little push here. That's that Momo 2T right here. So it's basically momentum reversal combined with a 2T. It kind of takes out that middle step there. And here's where it reacted on the micro. So we've got a nice, little pullback, and now it's kind of basing out here, trying to do a little bit of a phoenix now at this point, hugging that fan zone. But that's a good strategy in there, and that's what's happening here on the Nasdaq on that weekly time frame. MOMO stands for, it's just short for momentum reversal. So your momentum reversal is 3 highs with the evenly spaced highs, 1, 2, 3, and you get this nice V, inverse V between them. Actually, let me show you guys the template. I'm going to grab the template for you. And I sent you all out an email on the Momo 2T this week, so hopefully you guys all got that. I think my admin changed the title I had put on it though. So it's like, it's probably says like a week in League of Traders or something like that. But here's the momentum reversal. So you get those 3 highs there that are evenly spaced. With a Momo 2T though, what happens is that this comes up to here, pauses, and then does a 2T at that point. So it actually puts in a wider space between those highs, and it's an advanced strategy. So you get that extra space in there. And basically what it is it's a hybrid between a momentum reversal and a momentum reversal plus. A momentum reversal plus is this, where it goes and it does the 2T over here. So basically the Momo 2T takes out this middle section here and just kind of pushes those two together. So if you just like delete this middle portion here, so you'll have your first 2 waves and then you get your 2T portion over here. And then it usually goes into an avalanche, and that's what gold did too. It did kind of like a 1, 2, 3. So that's kind of what we're watching on the Nasdaq here. On the ES, on the intraday charts, what we've got going on, I posted this in the alerts channel for League of Traders too, is that we've got this trying to do a shallow avalanche here. So shallow avalanche, a regular avalanche looks like this. Shallow avalanche looks like that. So you'll actually get a slower start coming off of the high compared to the move into it. And then you get the stronger pickup. You guys from League of Traders yesterday will recall that we talked about how this portion formed here in yesterday's class. What happens is that it gives an early break, right, to the downside, pulls back up, and then goes. So we talked about this exact version of an avalanche in League of Traders yesterday in detail. And then this is picking up. So this is it's following along perfectly with what we talked about basically. Jesse, the momentum reversal template. Yes, let me show that to you guys again. Let me copy it. I'll put it in the room here as a handout. One second. I'm just going to save this. So hold on. JPEG. Momo reversal. and add it to handouts. All right, you guys see it there? There should be a little tab that says handouts. By the way, we're right at support, some initial support on that ES. Also, we were watching the YM for megaphone, and that's triggering here too. So you guys see that okay? The handout? Yes, perfect, awesome. Okay, so here's our shallow avalanche, and basically what we expect with that is that the momentum will pick up on the downside, which is exactly what it's done here. So this has room for further correction. We're just coming into some initial support levels from each of these previous little pivot highs is going to serve as support as things correct when you get these larger corrections. So right now we're kind of looking at this zone right here, and so the middle of this congestion as well. So that's kind of our first level of support at this point on the ES. Let's go look at the bigger time frames on the ES here for you guys. I'm going to show you guys the weeklies to start with, just like we looked at the Nasdaq. So you can see it's trying to do the same thing. It still has room. I mean, technically this could still pull up a little bit more before it fully would trigger that. We've got this bigger megaphone that is trying to form, but this is kind of a little small little portion to start with. So when we go up to a monthly time frame, that's not even that significant, that first little start. So you can see it's just like a little baby correction in here. And this is like what we saw on the Russell. And we also talked about this in League of Traders this week. We were looking at megaphones. Gotta widen this up here. So see how you've got this megaphone starting over here? And it's kind of doing a little bit of a choppier start here. And then it goes and it holds with the bigger formation. It's kind of forming a bigger formation. That's what happens when you get kind of these littler starts. They can still widen up and kind of still keep continuing to shift the momentum, but doing so on a bigger time frame, a bigger scale. So on the monthly chart of the ES, this is really nothing here back in 2018, the beginning of 2018. It's really nothing in the grand scale of this larger major correction that's taking place on the monthly and the yearly charts at this zone. So we're going to be looking at, let's see here, go back down the daily chart. You want to watch these levels for measured moves, for resistance levels as we're coming up, and pay attention to the smaller intraday charts for reversals. So strategies like that shallow avalanche that we just had here this morning, well, not, yeah, it triggered this morning, I guess, you know, right as we were going into class here. So that's going to be one of the types of strategies. You can see it's still having really good strength here on the downside. And let's pull up the Russell on the weekly. The Russell is really interesting because it is not conforming with the rest of the market. Here's our monthly chart. Add a little bit more data on here. It's really trying to do like a phoenix to push this up a little bit higher. Oh, it's just not going to go back that far. Let's put on the weekly. So see this? It's just basing out here. And it has this pretty nice channel. There's nothing in this channel to really give a huge momentum shift one way or the other. It's starting to have stronger momentum on the upside. So what we might end up seeing is some greater strength on the Russell coming out of this than we see on like the Nasdaq and the S&Ps if they try to go and push even further to the upside. The Russell might take over as a little bit of a gainer there. kind of like it did intraday here today, had a greater strength than the ES and definitely greater strength than the Nasdaq throughout today's session. So it's still just hanging out here in this trading range, and it's kind of favoring that upside. The only con it has against it is just that it had that higher high in there, but overall, not a huge con. Still showing greater favor at this point for upside. Let's go take a look at some of the other markets now. Got a double tap at that low there on the ES, or you can see it on the Nasdaq rather. Let's see here. So Shockley, I know a lot of people have been following, or why do I always call it Shockley, man? Every single time. Shake Shack. Shake Shack. It is starting, whoops, I moved my fib line there. We've got it at the 38.2%. Is Shockley still in business? It is. I still get stuff from friends trying to sell it to me. Here we were right at the 38.2% retracement on the monthly time frame, just that last major push up. So it has a good little bit of support here. On the shorter time frames, you can see kind of that shift here. Momentum's trying to pick up on the downside. What I would usually expect at this point is that we'll often see this try to do a decent bounce back up and then continue to sell off. So usually it will come into this level, the previous high before that happens, but it might not make it down there in this case. It might just kind of, shift a little bit more, do a little bit of a spike and then continue down. But in general, this is something that, given the way that this has formed this pattern here, it usually will continue to sell off. So bounces tend to be sellable. They can even have a really sharp bounce back to this previous high and then still turn around at that point. So be very cautious on this one if you're looking at like longer term investment opportunities. Roku is another one that we've seen a lot of the same type of action happening. And here you can see that bounce. So Roku has done that bounce. Whoops, sorry, you guys, I'm kind of jumping all over here. Here's the weekly. I'm going to widen this up. I got a new mouse pad and it's just not catching my wireless mouse very well. Works great on my other mouse. I've got two of them on here, but it's just not happy with the wireless one. Anyway, here's the same type of situation that we were looking on Shake Shack there. So this is the pivot high on Shake Shack. It's just like this, and it's pulled down, and it didn't come back into that pivot high. It bounced before that here in Roku. So you can see that that's going to be a possibility on Shake Shack too, and I still have Shockley in my head. So that's basically what's happening here on Roku. And so then I'd be looking for, short side setups on this now as this is coming back up into that previous high zone. So it might finish up this two wave that it has going up here. This has a three wave move, and then it's trying to do more of a two wave move. So it's kind of looking like that. And then I would look for short setups at that point. It might not make it all the way up there. It might try to turn around before that, but that would be like one of the most ideal situations. You can see it's kind of shifting a little bit. I had a 2T here on the 60-minute time frame. Right in here. It might have even been a Momo 2T if you go down on a smaller time frame. It's hard to see here. So it might not fully pull back up to that high. It might just start to turn around at this point, at kind of the halfway point back up. Beyond Bread. There's another one. Similar type of action. Let's pull that one up. I'm going to have to go back to my old mouse pad here. And I called it Beyond Bread, didn't I? Beyond Meat. Oh my gosh, you guys. Uh, you can tell where I get sandwiches from. It's not Beyond Meat. Here. Similar type of thing. So here, this kind of bounced, but it didn't do as big of a bounce as what we saw in the others. And this is the avalanche on the downside. Again, this is very similar to what we saw happening on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin basically doing the same thing on its way down. And I know everybody was like so excited that they had picked this up and bought it. And then, of course, as soon as it opened up trading for sellers, it's crashed. I continue to think this is, going to remain more on the speculative side. When we get down into here again, you're going to start to see some reactionary bounces again. But this is something that can still kind of keep selling and dwindling lower because it's a really niche market and it does have competition. It's not the only one out there. And I think a lot of times when you get like that first initial phase, you got, backlash against it and stuff. So it might not really get going and taking off again, like a lot of people are hoping. So, continue to be more cautious on this longer term as well. Am I a veggie burger girl? I like bean patties. That's my thing. I love those. Let's see here. What else we got here? Those are kind of like our main ones where we've been like everybody's been kind of like on board with all the craziness and excitement. Let's see. We are in the middle of earnings season right now. So we're going to see a lot of action after hours on a lot of things. Of course, we've seen like, this with Apple and Google and all of those things are going to just kind of get things going crazy after hours, especially if you're trading the Nasdaq. So for those of you that are futures traders, just remember as you're going into the end of the day that it's going to be higher risk if you're holding into the close just because of earnings right now. And that's what a lot of these gainers and losers are going to be on the bigger lists here. This is another example of when you get a pullback. I don't know what this stock is. It's not anything that I trade, but it looks like it's probably like a biotech company. But see how this pulled up here? Had this correction, and this is kind of like the same level that a lot of those like Shake Shack and Roku and stuff pulled into. And then it bounced, see? And then it came back into that previous high. And so that's where a lot of these can go and do this again. And then you got another reaction off of that. Now, in this case, this is gapping up on some news or something here to continue, but we won't necessarily get that. So if I go and look at SHAK again, and you look at the comparison, this is the same zone that kind of bounce can happen at. I know AMED had earnings. Oh my gosh, my charts. I'm totally changing my mouse pad back. This is a beautiful breakaway type of gap on the daily time frame. This is the type of gap that will usually give you a nice morning run on the trend because it's not only a breakout, but it's also a bear trap. So it's closing near the lows and then gapping up and clearing it. And that's why we have the nice run on it. So when you're looking at gaps and playing news and earnings over the week ahead, this is the perfect type of breakout that you want to see. And usually these will get going within the first couple minutes of the day. So most of your momentum is going to be in the morning. By afternoon, things are going to slow down, usually. But that's a great example there. I need to still go and add that extra data in there that Richard showed me how to add back on my trade station. Here's another example. We've got the bear trap and the breakout on the upside. So another good example of it. Got a lot of them here today. This is one that I wouldn't be as interested in, because notice where this opens. Even though it still, shows that run on the 60-minute time frame, it's opening at this previous high here, and it closed on a breakout, so it kind of had more oomph in the gap itself. So usually that can have a harder time continuing for like a good trend throughout the morning. It might like pop in the first 5 minutes and then kind of be done. Let's see what this ended up doing. I'll put this on like a 15-minute time frame. Yeah, it kind of just went up, and it was done by about 10, not even. Just smack this thing, you guys. Oh man, it was done, pretty early, by 10 o'clock here. I'm gonna find out where I put my mouse, my other mouse pad. Where would I put a target on something like this? Pat, which one were you referring to? Sorry, I might have changed my charts when you asked that question. Was it on AMED? AMED actually had just the pop in the first start too. One that just takes off. Usually I'm still looking for measured moves, looking for that on a bigger time frame. So like on a breakout like this, for example, you're going to be looking at these impulse moves back in here, and those are going to be kind of a guide for what to look for. This intraday actually gave us a good example of another pattern that we see on gaps during earnings season. You'll get a two-wave move, and then you'll get a third correction. For those of you in League of Traders, this will look really familiar because we talk about this all the time on our gap weeks. And that third move is actually what you're looking for as a buy setup. So you get your two waves down, and then that issues a buy. This is already pretty extended intraday, so it's struggling to keep going, but this can still keep creeping up this afternoon because of the way this turned around. But if this was like a gap on the downside, let's say here's your move over here, you got some downside action already, and then it gaps down and forms the same action right here, that's still a buy. You're looking for support at this point, and that can be a buy too. So if you got like a gap that's exhausted or a move that's exhausted, this might give you a push down right at the open, and then go and do this, and then turn around and go in and do a gap closure at that point. So that's another pattern that you'll just want to be watching for during earnings season on the intraday charts. You'll see it over and over and over again. Let me see if there's any others here today that I can show you so you get another example of it. This is a good, breakout continuation on there on the intraday. Here you can see, kind of similar shifting. And then here, this one went with the Phoenix. So that's what that AMED, that's what you'll normally see. This one didn't take off. But if it's not exhausted already intraday, you'll get that going with a Phoenix, just like on LHCG. And that's what will happen when it's a gap down and it goes to close the gap. It'll roll over here. It might have like a little baby Phoenix, and then it'll have a bigger one and then go up and close the gap, assuming it was a downside gap. So this is, nice intraday setup on these. Let's see if I can show you another example of it. I might look for one on the downside, see if it got some downside gappers that might be doing it for you. open this up here. So here's, one example of a pretty big exhausted gap. So sometimes you'll see that pattern here at the open, and then it will come up, might not totally close a gap in a case like this because it's still a bull trap here, but it can come back up and then basically turn around and sell off in the afternoon. But you can find that pattern a lot of times like right out of the open on a smaller time frame. Let me see if some of these you might be able to see them on like the tick charts. Make this a 100 tick here. Come on, man. Work with me. Maybe not. Oh, man. Fine. We'll do the 30-second. So you would probably see it right here at the very open here. You see how that comes down like that and then kind of shifts momentum? This is where you would normally see that type of thing happening. And then what would happen is it would just be the two waves down, and then it would have that third wave that would shift it. And that would go into buy and it go into a phoenix and then help, continue to pull up and close the gap. So, it started to try to do that, but this case, it didn't do the two-wave measured move. It kind of shifted momentum. I don't know if you can see on the 15-second a little bit better. Come on, you behave there, you chart. So what you would get is it would do more of, that, and then it would go and have the shift here. So this one just did it with the second wave actually shifting momentum. But yeah, get the idea. Let's see about, what's the other one that did a bigger gap? Oh, got a lot of thin stuff here. I need to check my sorting on my charts. So you can't really quite see it here, but these will usually, again, it's usually that first kind of start of the day, and then it will flip around and do the gap closure. So you're going to find examples where it looks textbook, and then you're going to find examples where it's just not quite. And some of these might show up a little bit better on tick charts, but notice how this kind of shifts, even though it's just like really, really thin. See how it's shifting down there at the lows? That's the idea that you want to look for. And then they'll start to pull up. So you want to find those that are gapping into support like that. And that's going to be something that's going to be big with earnings. So here, see again how it's shifting down here? So you get your main move down, you get the extra move, and in this case, it went for a 2B too. So your 2B is technically your trigger, pulls up, goes, does the Phoenix. So it's a good little day trading strategy. And the more extended this is on the downside, the more this is going to reverse going into midday. So that is what one of the strategies is that you want to keep in mind for those of you that are stock traders. In this case, look at the daily chart on this TDS. This is a really nice type of breakaway gap where you see good continuation and it goes pretty much right out of the gate. So on something like this, you're going to want to go down to a smaller tick chart and watch for continuation strategies. A lot of times with breakaway gap and the bull and bear trap gaps, as long as that gap is not huge, you're going to get continuation patterns within the first 6 minutes of the day. So they will go fast like this does, and then they'll have the strongest move into 10 o'clock, sometimes 10:15, but that's when you'll start to see the corrections like that two wave and then shift pattern that I showed you. So question on Tesla. Tesla is one where you had that gap that was just too extreme, kind of exhausted the move. I'm going to find my mouse pad after here. My gosh. Okay, so you have the gap that is pretty extreme here, kicks that off, and it can't go anywhere the day of the gap. We talked about this last week, I think. It goes the next day after it has a little bit of a rest, tries to do the continuation the next day. Overall, Tesla has a lot of resistance over here. So what usually happens with a gap like this that goes from a phoenix and it kind of tries to turn it around and it's a huge momentum move, it can continue, but just so more gradually and more slowly. But you really have to watch the intraday because they're also prone to doing the shallow avalanche like what we saw happening on the ES earlier as we were getting started. So it could do that on an intraday chart. Let's look at what Tesla's doing here intraday. It keeps popping that up. So the way this is starting, we really cannot rule out that shallow avalanche because it has that more gradual move here. Notice it's the two waves and then kind of goes for the third. So it pulls up, tries to go into that Phoenix level and just can't get going there. So if this goes out about that same amount of time, does like another base along here, this could actually gain momentum again back to the downside, like into here, just like what we saw happening on the ES. Let me put that ES chart up. So see how this kind of pulled lower here, went like that, and then fell? That's the same idea that could happen with Tesla. So given that it's not holding up here very well, it didn't just like turn back and gain some more momentum on the upside and base out. That's usually what you would see if it was going to go and, be able to do the creeping on the upside and keep going. It's just not doing that. So I'd be really, really hesitant on the upside on this right now. Let's see. Did I cover everybody's? I think I got all of them that you guys were asking about so far. If you have another one you want me to look at, go ahead and post it. We're going to go take a look at our Forex pairs here. I'm actually going to look at Bitcoin here first because I want to show you guys that kind of same thing we were looking at with Shake Shack, and everything. So see how it pulled down here, popped back up, then pulled down into that zone, and then did that extra pop. Again, it's the same thing. So just giving you guys a lot of examples. And we did look at the NQ Harvey was like the very first thing we looked at. The weekly is basically trying to do a Momo 2T. That's what we're looking for on the weekly on the NQ. TSM is starting to finally show some shifting in here, so we should get bigger correction action on this one now. Monthly, good strength. So we're just looking at some daily correction. I don't know if this monthly is going to go and do like a 1, 2, 3 or not. It's like it's at a do or die point for it basically, where it has potential to try to do that measured move, but on the shorter time frame, it's pretty exhausted. It's, you know, a good impulse move size here at that level, and it's doing a little bit of a slightly higher high, so it's already starting to shift momentum a bit. So I think it's going to be a little bit harder to do this and really kind of keep going and keep that momentum up. We do see that happening at times, but this is basically that do or die point. So you got to watch the smaller time frames and see how momentum shifts, because sometimes it will go for that measured move and sometimes it will just get stuck here and it'll pull back into the range. And actually, Tesla was a good example of one that did that. Let me show you. So see this monthly chart here on TSM? Now watch and look at Tesla. See how that had that move it tried to go? This actually went a little bit further than TSM has so far, and then it pulled back and it kind of shifted this momentum here and pulled back in. So that's a risk that you have at this point on TSM, not necessarily going to fully develop, but we can't say one way or the other because it's kind of even odds on it doing that. Because what you have here is it's basically a steep 2T type of formation, because when this broke here at the high, notice the distance between this high, and then this high, and then where it broke. Because it didn't have that measured distance and it didn't pull back a little bit more here before it broke, it means that there's a higher chance that this can treat this more like a 2T type of pattern and turn around. And that's why we have more of that kind of even odds that this might not be able to go further and not do that bigger continuation. If it had had a little bit of that extra correction here on that monthly and weekly time frame, then the odds for that full larger gaining even another level of strength would be greater. But because it didn't have that wider spacing, that flips the odds. So it lowers and decreases the odds of it doing that full bigger run and makes it easier for this to try to do a bigger correction at this point and essentially treat this just like it's an extended 2T. So that is the reasoning behind my thoughts on this right now. So as we head into next week, this could easily do a correction here on this daily time frame. Resistance here again, you guys, on the markets on their bounce. They have kind of a measured impulse move on intraday charts. ITRI. This is so weird. I don't know why that keeps popping up like that. It's like right lined up there. Good resistance here on ITRI on the monthly time frame, but since it already has that first swing up, actually look at that. That's that shift pattern we were talking about to watch on intraday charts. So since this has this one swing up, pulls back, pullback is more gradual, momentum is pretty strong on the upside on this retest of highs, even though this is a resistance zone here, and we've even got a measured move into this resistance zone. the odds are greater that it could try to still break and push through that and go for something more like that. So kind of like, again, like a 50-50 chance. It might go and do more of a base pattern and try to pull up, or it could do a more rapid continuation. And if it does the more rapid continuation, what we usually see is this will be like a 1, 2, 3, can do a little bit of a longer correction, and then go and do another 1, 2, 3. And that can even bring it back up into that zone. So we will see that pattern offer itself up a lot with a situation like this as well. But it's kind of like 50-50 chance here because this pulled back more than 50%, which is why this is a resistance zone. But all the other factors like the trend placement, the momentum, they make it easier for that resistance zone to ultimately break. So whether it does it with a little bit of a bigger correction or kind of pauses and offers the continuation, the odds are still higher that eventually it can get there. If it had pulled back less than 50%, it would be easier to go right through it without much of a pause at all. But since it did pull back more than 50%, there is that extra level of resistance here. That's why we don't have quite as much of a reaction off of that double tap of that high too. Kind of trying to get off to a slower start on that. Indices are holding resistance here intraday that I just mentioned a second ago. I'll just show that to you here. So here's what we were seeing a minute ago. It was coming up into that zone again, resistance. Let's see our Forex. Euro dollar. Again, we're seeing that trying to gain that momentum. It's kind of negating that widening up that we were looking for originally. So originally it was trying to do kind of a little bit more favor of it going like that and coming back down into this zone, but it's bouncing more on the smaller time frames. So it's trying to shift that momentum on the smaller time frame. Here you can see we came up right to the 50%. It's holding fib levels on this pretty well. Overall momentum here, where it stopped, since this stopped at 50% and couldn't push up even further, it's still iffy whether it's going to be able to make it and break that upper channel or not. If it had pulled up here more quickly to like the 61.8 or 76.4% retracement, the odds of it ultimately breaking that overall channel on the upside would have been much stronger. So even though it popped with strong momentum, see what happened over here? It had strong momentum and it still failed. So we really needed to get that to push higher to give that confirmation. And it could still do that as we go into next week, but we would want to see it try to do it pretty quickly and not pause too long at this 50% point. So in order to break this and pull up higher, it should have ideally had more strength coming off of this low and not reacted as much off that 50% zone. Dollar yen, still in the wedge. Did the fake break we talked about, had the room to pull up, but it's just not getting any momentum going with it. So this is the same situation. We would have wanted this to retrace this drop coming up a good 3/4, 2/3 of the way before it tried to react in order to get it to have a continuation move on the upside. And we just aren't seeing that. There's not any confirmation on the strength. So if this had pulled up faster up to that zone, basically up that upper channel, it would have been able to pause that channel and ultimately have a better chance of breaking it. And we aren't seeing that at all here. So it's the same situation that we ran into on the euro dollar, just not getting that initial confirmation, which means that the bears still have a lot of control on these, despite the shorter term, more rapid acceleration. USD CAD, good shot for this to still pull lower. We're seeing it shifting momentum, trying to turn around and get some momentum going on so that we get another pullback here on the monthly chart as well. So I do expect more downside on the US Canadian dollar or loonie here. The Lira, of course, has been acting like Bitcoin lately. Here's that shift again that I was talking about that you guys are going to see a lot of times on our earnings plays. So you'll get your first moves down and then you'll get that shift. And in this case, it shifted, you know, with the momentum reversal into the Phoenix. But it's that rounding off that happens. And it's also the same thing that we see with things like Shake Shack, where it pops up, does kind of the retest, pulls back down again, and then does another bounce again. So in this case, our last pivot low is way down there, or pivot high rather. Had a little bit of one here on the monthly. Show you what it looks like on the weekly. So that's where that second test was right there. It didn't quite hit it perfectly. Usually it would. Usually it would come back down and do a better test of that. So it came down, did a little bit of the retest, came down, did a little bit of a better secondary low, and then pulled back up. So this is what happens on a lot of the IPOs and things like that. And then the ones that, you know, really don't have a lot holding on, they'll go and they'll go like that, and they'll kind of keep going lower. Bonds, let me pull up bonds. And we'll take a look at wheat again too. So this is another example. Let me put the retracement on here, where we're seeing these just not giving up that additional confirmation and pulling up quite enough. This one went to the 61.8, kind of got stuck at that 61.8. I really like the 76.4 as a better retracement when it's going to give us another confirmation of a continuation move. A lot of times 61.8 is okay, but this one stalled at 50% and then just slunk into that 61.8. So it didn't sustain the momentum into the 61.8. Here's another example. It pops up, but just doesn't give you that bigger sustained move. So I don't see anything here on wheat that gives us a really good bias one way or the other. This could easily break either way. Just trying to do this lovely little pennant here, symmetrical triangle. And we've got our lows, kind of shifting momentum. But even a channel break, like even if this manages to break this channel like this could still come back down and do like a momentum reversal plus type of strategy. This has been good for swing traders on the shorter time frames here, but we aren't getting anything for sustained larger position trading. We have another symmetrical triangle here on bonds too. This actually has a momentum reversal plus here on the daily chart. Show that to you on the 240. Futures are holding that resistance I pointed out, by the way. So here's kind of that momentum reversal plus type of setup here, where it has that shift, breaks the channel, goes to the slightly lower low, and then bounces. So we've seen a lot of this impacting and changing the momentum. So this is coming off of a high here, where originally this had a lot of strength that it could have kept going on the downside, but then it had that shift. So kind of slowed. A pure momentum reverse plus would have the 3 evenly spaced lows, and then it would bounce, break the channel, have a 2-wave move down to the lower low, and then reverse. But it's still coming off that same type of idea here. So when you have really strong momentum into support or resistance and you're thinking, oh, hey, you know, that momentum should keep going, if it does something like that, that can shift that. This could have also based here and offered a continuation. So it really comes down to the smaller time frame that you got to watch. We call that a do or die point. Because this only had one wave down, it increases the risk that it could have that second wave. But the smaller time frames went and shifted this. Also call this the zone of pain because it's a good zone where a lot of people get trapped. So bonds, larger time frame. I'm going to go up to the weekly on this. We're pretty exhausted on here. It's going to be hard to try to sustain this move further. We will sometimes see situations where this will go and do like a 2T, the Momo 2T, things like that are also possible here. But basically, it's watch the smaller time frame at this point. Don't rely purely upon the larger time frame. Watch what's going on the smaller time frames at levels like this. Because we know it's a widening up zone, but there's so many different patterns that can form at the widening up zones. It's all of those different reversal strategies, 2Ts, momentum reversals, Momo 2T, momentum reversal plus, all of those can happen at these levels like this. It's just smaller momentum time frame shifts that will give you the trades at this point. Oh, here you can see the momentum reversal plus a little bit cleaner because then it shows this as a fake first low and the even 3 spacing. And you can see the 2 waves down here more clearly on the 20,000 tick chart. Here's the 2 waves and then goes into the Phoenix here. So this right now is just going to be day trade, short-term strategy action because you're not at a good level here for swing trades. This would be a good level for swing trades, but not here. SWKS. So see, this is what is, you know, a common situation with these symmetrical triangles. They can serve as both continuation and reversal strategies. In this case, it's serving the same idea as a Phoenix, so it has the main move up. and then it's basically treating it as a two-wave correction in here. But these can do these fake moves up to the upside, and they can turn around and go into another range longer and then break lower. In this case, it's strong enough that it's not doing that. So it's treating it more like a two-wave measure move, but this is a lot of resistance over here. So it's going to be hard to break through that resistance, especially since it had a 2T at the highs over here, where it went and did that trap at that slightly higher high. That makes this an even stronger zone of resistance. So it is harder to break through that. I will say that because of the way this is forming, though, a lot of times the way that, because this has gained momentum here, this can do a bit of a stronger move up into that zone. So it didn't fully come into it with the first flush here. If that had gone up in this would be a really sharp reversal strategy that would usually be pretty strong on the downside, because it's basically your first retest of it. Basically, think of it like a head and shoulders. So you got your shoulder, head, and then it would try second chance entry here, and then go in and do a shoulder, and it can break down and have the stronger downside. But since this goes out further and is trying to do momentum, if that momentum picks up, it's a little bit more difficult to turn around. So this gaining strength here is harder on the bears, even though this is still going to be a resistance zone. It's not as positive as if this had bounced up faster, which seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Because you're thinking, oh, hey, if it does a rapid bounce, then it shows that the momentum is stronger. But when you have a 2T first and you have the slightly higher high, that more rapid bounce is basically like we call it a double tap, and you're like retesting this previous high as a second chance entry. And a lot of times that actually can reverse and will go and have that bigger downside. So the fact that it's weighted and then tries to gain momentum, it tells me, maybe the bulls are trying to regain some steam. It doesn't confirm it until it does a break of that parallel channel, though. So until it breaks that parallel channel, this still has potential to go and do like another head and shoulders in here, smaller head and shoulders. But if it breaks that upper channel, it's going to be harder for the bears to regain control again. I hope that makes sense, you guys. It's kind of an advanced strategy here on this one. A lot of times it just comes down to that last momentum move that can change a pattern when you're dealing with these zones of congestion like this. All right, you guys. Well, that is it for today. Richard, I agree with you on Bitcoin. All right, you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. Try not to eat too much of your candy. Your kids has candy, or your grandkids has candy. I blame Grandma here for bringing in a lot of the candy. Grandma is visiting us. I know some of you are already still coming out of your sugar comas. All right, you guys, have a wonderful weekend. I will see you all back here next week. I will be in Vegas in about a week. Let's see here. So we've got Vegas coming up next week. Yeah, I'll be in Vegas next week. So I think we'll still be doing our forward focus next week, but I've got to double check my schedule for everything going on in Vegas, because they've like doubled up the things that I'm doing there this year. So if we don't end up with Forward Focus Live next week, I will do a video version of it. I'll let you guys know in League of Traders for sure, but I just don't have the confirmed schedule back from them yet. So as it is, we're going to plan on doing Forward Focus Live, but I'll let you guys know if there's any change of plans. So have a wonderful weekend, you guys.